entrepreneur, but it seems you've started to focus your attention, not just started, it was a little while ago, on climate change. What's driving, why are you doing that?
There's a couple of things. Maybe a quick bit of background. So I set up my first business when I was 15, sold that when I was 20 for a small amount of money, and then set up another business, sold that in 1999 for a bigger amount of money. And then I retired for about 5 minutes. Then I set up a gaming software company that became very big, 2,500 people, $500 million in revenues. And then we ended up selling that business in 2008 for about $500 million. And I knew at that point that retiring was a waste of time, that we were put here to do stuff. And so, but I didn't want to do another 10 or 20 years of a startup without it having any meaning. And so, yes, make money, but also have an impact. And I'd seen, like almost everybody else, I'd seen An Inconvenient Truth, and that had stuck with me. And you realize that the world has existential threats, whether that's climate change, nuclear holocaust, or whatever. And I just decided that it would be good to spend my time, doing what I could on that, but also doing it through the expression that I have, which is business. And so in 2010, we set up an energy efficiency company. And the reason we set up an energy efficiency company was the data just blew us away. So according to Lawrence Livermore University, our laboratory, in 2011, we wasted in just factories and buildings, not transport, not a whole lot of other sectors, but just in transport or in industrial and in commercial, we wasted $1.2 trillion of energy. So we create this incredibly precious resource. We damage the planet in doing it, and then we just waste like 70% of it. And that to me just blew my mind. And so we set up Crowley Carbon, which is an energy efficiency company. It's operating in 23 countries. And it saves our clients kind of colossal amounts of money every year. Our biggest client would save about $150 million annually in wasted energy. So, so that was our first foray into climate. Yeah.
So what did you do differently there? Energy services companies have been around a long time, and a lot of them had a reputation, for being a little shady on the shady side. What makes what you're doing different? Because you seem to have tapped this thing, and you seem to be making it work. What are you doing different?
Yeah, some days I think we've tapped it, and other days I think not. But clearly, it's worked out pretty well. And what we're doing differently, energy efficiency is a funny area because, like, if you take the solar on my house right now, I can just go into an app here and see how much energy is being created. The problem with energy efficiency is you're not creating energy; you are just not wasting it, right? And the problem in buildings and factories in particular is that they're changing all the time. So in a factory, yesterday you made 10,000 widgets, today you only made 400 widgets. The widgets yesterday were big, the widgets today were small, it was hot yesterday, it was cold today. So it's incredibly difficult to track a saving. And the only way to track a saving is to track a very big saving. And so, but if you're going to track a big saving, then you need to save money on their boilers and their chillers and their air compressors and their this and their that, which means you need a monster team of experts. So we gathered a monster team of experts. We bought businesses. We hired, luckily, very well. And then also we built this amazing software platform, which you can only do now. You couldn't do it 20 years ago. Because now you can have tiny sensors, you have cloud technology, you can handle massive amounts of data. So you can digitize the factory, even a very old factory, and you can do that relatively easy. And once you digitize it, you know every single thing that's going on all the time. And so you not only save energy, but you also know when a machine is going to break, which is very valuable to a business if you can tell them that. And also you know when a process is not performing properly, which means you can increase quality, you can increase throughput. And that whole revolution is happening now, and it'll go on right through the next decade, or this decade that we're going into now. And bring it back to COVID, what's happening a lot in this time is that people realize that they were buying their PPE from China and their drugs from somewhere else. And people have realized that, it would be great to have some of these factories, much closer. But the only way you can afford to have these factories much closer is if they're hyper efficient. And this whole digitization thing allows you to have hyper efficient factories, and that everybody wins in that situation. So the other things then, just to quickly wrap it up, is clients used to turn around to us and say, well, I don't believe that you can save me this money. So then we did a partnership with two of the biggest insurance companies in the world to insure the risk. And so if I say to you, I'm going to save you 50 million bucks and you don't believe me, that's okay, because the biggest insurance company in the world are backing me to tell you that you're going to save this money. So that excuse is gone. And then the other excuse that people say is, I don't have any money. Now, look, if I can save you 100 million bucks on a 2-year payback, that's a 50% return on your money, right? And so if you can borrow money at 2%, and I'm giving you a 50% return, then I'm sure you have money. But if you don't have money, then we do what's called shared savings, which is we partner with big financial institutions. And we say to you, look, if we're going to save you 50 million bucks, how about we take 25, you take 25, and then after 5 or 7 years, you can take all the money. And so we got it to a position where people couldn't say no, right? Because, hang on, do you want to save money? Yes. All right. Then let's go through the reasons why you wouldn't do this. And eventually you get to, there are no reasons, right? But amazingly still, some large corporations say no, right? Which shocks me, but there you go. But thankfully, 4 of the top 5 food companies in the world work with us, 7 of the top 8 pharmaceutical companies. So, a lot of oil and gas companies. So, thankfully, there's a lot of business out there.
So you got involved with finance as well. I mean, maybe you were involved
Yeah.
before this, but is financing something you're doing as well as part of this business?
Yeah, our whole group is called Cool Planet Group. And then we have Crowley Carbon, which is the engineering company. We have Clarity, which is our Internet of Things software business. And then we have Cool Planet Capital, which provides capital. It's effectively a bank. And then we have a thing called Carbon Re, which is the insurance company. And so it's a kind of vertically integrated. And then we have Crowley Solar that does solar, large industrial solar. So it's a kind of one-stop shop for reducing carbon, basically. We're just getting into batteries right now. So it's everything really to do with carbon and digitization. Yeah.
So when you do energy efficiency, some things have really fast payback, some things have slower payback, but they still make sense. Renewable energy can have slower payback. Are you doing unique financing that acknowledges different levels of paybacks and makes some of those longer term investments more feasible?
Yeah, we strategically agreed out with the client. Like, I'll give you an example of a job we did in Canada recently, where they needed to replace their boilers. The boilers were going to cost $12 million. The payback on that was going to be stupidly long, but there was a whole load of other stuff that was way shorter payback. So the blend, and they really, really needed to replace the boilers because they were breaching environmental laws. And we were able to blend the short-term payback with the long-term payback stuff, get a blended 3-year payback, and got their boilers. And the customer was ecstatic. But some of the stuff we did, like load shifting, where you take the load off the peak times when the utility charges you more money, like we were able to save them $3 million on that. And that had like a 2-month payback, right? So when you blend it together, then you get a win. And a lot of our clients do that because they need to upgrade their equipment and they can't afford to do it. And so we blend in other things that work, So yeah, it works out quite well. You just have to be commercially savvy, really, to see what the client is looking for and then supply that to them.
I'm interested.
So, yeah.
I'm interested in how you make your business decisions and follow the market. I do because of what I've done, I've spent 10 years traveling around talking to some of the most inspirational people I could find. And I do a lot of speaking on this now. And what I've found is what I've started to tell people is if you want to worry about climate change and you want to invest in technology, you just have to follow the money now, because renewable energy is the cheapest energy money can buy. The car companies finally are over the top of the hill, and I say they're on a toboggan on the other side, on the way down already, because they moved $300 billion of investment into EVs and batteries. And they're not talking about it, but they know that's the future, and they're worried crazy because they still only make money on their ICE cars.
They should be worried.
and energy, if you look at energy, Bloomberg says about 77% of the investment in power generation between now and 2050 will be renewable. So if you follow those three packages of investments, I say that's where the future is. That's what you seem to be doing.
Yeah, well, let me say something radical to you.
Okay.
Peter Thiel, the famous investor, always says, he asks a question of people like, what is it that you believe that almost nobody else believes, right? So let me tell you what I believe. And then I'll back it up with a huge amount of data. So I believe that climate change will be fully resolved by 2030. And it's got nothing to do with governments and regulation, because if it had to do with governments and regulation, we would still be here in 2100. But it has to do with economics, right? And so if you take the top 5 issues on climate change in the world, okay, they vary around 3 subjects, right? First one is energy, then transport, then food, right? Let's take energy. So during COVID, a couple of PPAs were announced, power purchase agreements, for solar and battery, and they were at between 1 and 2 cents a kilowatt hour, right? Yeah. So I think Canadians work in kilowatt hours, so and I can't convert that to BTUs, and so that means it's all over for fossil fuels in energy, right? Because that cost is going to have again in the next 5 years, and nothing can compete with it. And before, they used to say that coal was cheaper if you took into account the damage coal is doing. But actually now, coal's like, no bank will bank a new coal plant. That's all over. And you quoted there Bloomberg's prediction. And this is true of the food and transport that I'm going to talk about as well. But the thing, Bloomberg's predictions are great, but they're wrong. The reason they're wrong is they don't take into account precipitous events, okay? Right. So an example of that would be, well, coal will still be with us at 2040, according to our projections. But if nobody will bank a coal plant, right, then you can't have one, right? And there's a whole load of other things, like Chesapeake Energy going out of business. All of these precipitous events are never in those projections. And all around climate change at the moment, the precipitous events are happening by the second. Like, we have oil and gas companies that are clients of ours that publicly announced this year that they have no dividends anymore. So if you're a pension fund and you hold an oil stock, like if you take BP, for example, which is making a great pivot to renewable energy, but this year it halved its dividends. So if I'm Standard Life and I need to pay a pension, right, then I can't hold BP stock anymore. So now all the big pension funds can't hold BP stock. Big problem, right? So the precipitous events will make the other side go faster. The other thing is, people project battery prices dropping and dropping, which they have been, but they don't take into account a step drop in price, like a massive drop in price. And why would that happen? That would happen because volume is just going so fast. And Tesla are going to announce in the next week a major shift in battery technology. Again, we don't know what it is, but it is going to be profound. So that's energy. Transport, we also kind of know the story, right? Electric, but like, a lot of people don't believe it. But if you look at the data, like, if you're anyway financially astute and you look at the data around electric cars and you think ICE is going to be okay past 2030, you are not a good person at judging numbers, right? Because all of the graphs are just going in one direction right now. And so that's transport is done. Then people say, what about airplanes? Airplanes, first of all, is only 2% of the carbon problem. If you ask some people, they think it's 40%, but it's really only 2%. And that's next, right? And we have, like, once energy is sorted, then we can generate hydrogen. If we can generate hydrogen, we can generate avgas. If we can, so we don't need to change the planes. We'll just generate it from free energy, right? And so another problem solved. And then the biggest one that's left is food. And in food, there's a company called Solar Foods in Finland. And they are creating, not even in a lab, they now have a factory doing it. They are creating protein. They're creating a powder that's 70% protein, 20% carbs, 10% fats, and other things, out of thin air, right? They're creating this. It's 10 times cheaper than dairy protein powder, and uses something like 100 times less land, or even more than that, right? And the precipitous event there is, you take a country like New Zealand, right? 70% of its agricultural exports is protein powder, right? So that's gone. That's gone now, right? As soon as Solar Foods can finish their first factory, that's over, right? So all these, then what happens is, if you can't use the dairy protein powder, then meat prices are going to go up sevenfold, because you got to pay for the cow somehow. When meat prices go up sevenfold, then all of a sudden the Beyond Meat burger, which at that point will have halved in price, will now be way more attractive than it is today. Tastes the same, give or take, right? And certainly version 3.0 of it is going to taste exactly the same. So again, precipitous events, people underestimate precipitous events. And when you get those top 5, because it's a classic 80-20 rule, when you get those top 5 problems out of climate change, we're done. Now, what's driving those is not government regulation. What's driving that is pure economics. There is a wall of private equity money going in, like 6.3 trillion, right, over the next 5 years, going into these opportunities, right? So this thing is done and done. Yeah.
So Norman, I like your 3 boxes, but I think you left out one of my favorite big boxes.
Go for it. Yeah, I'm sure I did.
And that's buildings. You know, if I had the privilege of doing a little work with the city where I live on their energy transition plan, and they say, you know, they like to say our problem in our city is 3 big boxes: 1, buildings, about a third; 2, transportation, about a third; and 3, industry, about a third. But of course, you know, they didn't mention energy, which is buried in those other statistics. So it really depends on how you package it. But buildings, huge opportunity, don't you think?
Well, think about what a building is, though. So you can make an existing building more efficient, and you can make it like 50% more efficient normally. But if the energy going into it carries no carbon, then it's not a problem, right? But then new buildings are a problem, because concrete is horrible from a carbon point of view. But if you use free energy to create concrete, then concrete is just rock, right? So there isn't a problem with concrete. There is a problem with the energy that it took to create it, because cement is created by melting rock effectively. So if that energy doesn't have a carbon footprint, then build away, right? And there are new materials in buildings all the time, and that's already happening anyway. And concrete is definitely under a lot of pressure, but but that's done too, right? If you take these 3 things and you overlay them over the problems, like there's something like 90 of the 100 top problems are gone, right? And like there's an interesting number. The company that wrote first about this transition and what I'm describing is a British company called Rethink X, right? And they've been writing reports in this area, and they've been right every single time. And they've been doing this since 2005. If you invested $100,000 in 2005 and you followed their advice that has been in their reports, right? $100,000, how much do you think you'd have now?
Sounds like a trick question.
It is a trick question. Yeah, $25 million.
Wow.
Yeah. So when somebody says to me, we can't afford climate change to fix it, show me what's a better return. Right?
I think one of the things I'm hearing you say is don't be ideological about your solutions. Don't project the
Completely.
past to the future, because
No,
the past is not the future, and the future most
no,
certainly
no,
will be different, and those
absolutely.
predictions most certainly will be wrong. I remember meeting a young engineer who I was quite taken with, who he was a big fan of geothermal. And he, you know, while all the other builders are running around trying to build the home that requires zero energy, passive houses or net zero houses, super insulated houses, earth ships, you know, Michael Reynolds from the US,
Yeah,
he came out and he said, well, you know what? I can renovate a home to net zero for half the price if you just let me put more geothermal in and less insulation. So it was kind of counter to what everybody else was
yeah,
saying, but it
yeah,
was half
yeah,
the price because he said,
yeah,
look, geothermal is 4 times more, 400% efficient. So I can add a lot more geothermal and it's going
yeah,
to be cheaper than adding insulation. And
yeah.
so I think that's what I
And
hear.
nowadays, if you went solar now, you'd be like, I'm sitting in my home here. It's not a small house, and it's got no carbon footprint because the solar is pumping away. It's powering the laptop I'm talking to you on, right? So, but back to your point about like you put it very well there. You said like, you know, we can't keep looking to the past, right? And the problem, we set up our own foundation called Cool Planet Experience because we found that all of the NGOs, not all of them, there are some amazing NGOs in climate, but the vast majority of them are living in the past, right? And their messaging is not working. They try to use guilt, and we all know that guilt is not a motivator for action, right? It is just making us feel more and more guilty. And they're not solutions focused at all. Their solutions involve making us feel bad and making governments feel bad. But like, so what we felt was the truth of it is that we have within our grasp now the technology. We don't need any more technology, although we will get more, but we have within our grasp now the technology to make our lives way better, right? To solve climate change and to make the poorest of the poor's lives way better. So an example of that, right, is I can take a stainless steel precision fermentation vessel and some solar panels. I can go to Lubumbashi in the Congo, right? And I can create protein to feed all of the village just today, right?
Yeah.
I just take this finished technology and I do that, right? So this is profound. And then they can build houses out of the latest materials that cost very little and actually are locally occurring. They can be well insulated. If they have energy out of solar, they can have air conditioning, which means diseases will be a lot less. It's profound. And yet, when you listen to a lot of the NGOs, it's all just about, oh, we're all screwed. How could we have got to this? So what our foundation does by creating education curriculums for schools and around the world, and also by building centers, is giving an entirely more empowering message. And when we launched it, Sir Richard Branson launched it in 2019. In the first 6 months, 50,000 people came to our center.
Right.
And that wasn't because we had a good ad campaign. It was because a mom or a dad would bring their kids, and then they would go to other families and they would say, you have to go and see this because this message is what you need to hear, right? And more that message needs to go out there. You know?
So I often say that altruism or fear, that'll motivate 4% of the population who are activists. We've already had them
That's right.
enlisted for the last 30 years. So
Yeah.
what we need now is everybody else.
Completely. And it's not, these people aren't bad. They are actually very, very good people, but they lack information to know where we are right now, right? And it is no good discussing a Nokia 3110 from 1998 right now. We're into smartphones. And so it's likewise with this, right? What's the point in discussing anything like this? It's all about what are we doing now? How are we moving? And governments will not do it. They are not motivated to do it. The age group of these people means they're not savvy enough to do it. And yes, there are exceptions, but in general, it's a pretty sad landscape out there. So how we break our group down is, and we joke about this, is we have the boring bit, we have the supermodel, and we have wisdom, right? And so the boring bit, energy efficiency, is kind of boring, right? It's all about bits and bytes and engineering and enthalpy and blah, blah, blah. Now, the financial result is not boring, and the carbon result is not boring, but the day-to-day is kind of boring. So to get people to get more excited about it, we have our supermodel. And so, and this isn't a sexist comment, because you can have a male supermodel and a female supermodel. And but when you're walking into a party, if you're the boring guy like me, yeah, it helps if you have a supermodel on your arm, right? Because everyone immediately thinks you're more interesting. What's even better than one supermodel is having 4 supermodels on your arm, because then you're obviously either very rich or extremely interesting. And so in our case, how do we make the boring things really interesting? So our Electrify business, what that does is we look at some of the most beautiful cars that were ever created, right? So the Corvette Stingray, the Ferrari Testarossa, right? And the people who designed those cars had to make many compromises, because they were designed in the 60s and the 70s. The Stingray was designed in 59. And so we approached those designers, who are some of the most famous designers in the world, and we said, would you like to recreate or reimagine your car as the perfect car? Because it's electric, it's way faster, it has all the technology that you couldn't have back then. And we will create some of the world's most beautiful cars, right? And so we approached these designers, and 4 of the top 5 car designers in the world agreed to do it. Yeah. And so what Electrify does now, and we're launching the first car later this year, is create these beautiful cars. And then what we do is we use the attention that is attracted from doing that, and we use that attention to focus on climate and to focus on the message. But also the cars, thankfully, make us a lot of money. And already, like actors like Dev Patel, Ellie Goulding, the singer, we made Ellie's wedding car. Like, these very famous people are now latching onto this, and then they want to help as well, right? So you have this virtuous circle that you can gather very positive attention around the stuff that maybe isn't as exciting, like precision fermentation, right? But then even if you do all of those things and you get the technology right and all of that, the problem we have now is wisdom, right? Because what's happening in the world is we are creating more and more amazing technologies all the time that make our lives easier. But I don't think we are getting wise at the same pace that we are inventing these technologies. And if we continue like this, we're going to blow the world up, basically, because our capability since 1945 to blow the world up is much more sophisticated. And now we've got germs, and we've got AI, we've got all these other things, but we are not getting wiser. In actual fact, tragically, we are getting stupider. And so a lot of what we're doing in our wisdom side is educating people more and more about science and about how this stuff works, but also spiritually educating people, not from any religion. I don't have a problem with any religion, but much more from the kind of spiritual connection of connecting with other people, meditating, and just deeply understanding what our responsibility here is. And what we find is that combination of the boring stuff that makes money, drops carbon, the supermodel that makes that much more exciting, and then wisdom to frame it all together is the ultimate combination.
So Norman, you promised me 4 supermodels. I don't know.
And a sexy car. Yeah.
Listen, so I wanted to ask you about your car. So what are you driving these days?
So in the shed, so in my office, as I'm literally sitting here, because I'm very lucky to live in a house that overlooks the sea, but my office is in the other side, right? And it overlooks the hills, or underlooks the hills. But in the garage right now, there is a 1981 Ferrari 308, which has been electrified. There is a 1972 Land Rover Series 3 that's absolutely beautiful and has been electrified. And then there's a 1963 Corvette Stingray. And the Corvette Stingray is in the process of being electrified. And for those car nerds listening, it will go from 267 brake horsepower, maybe, although I think some of those horses have died over the years, to 2,000 brake horsepower. So,
I didn't hear you were wanting to have one of the new Roadsters in that garage.
I would love to, but I think you need to be really patient there. I think we're a huge fan of Teslas and very happy shareholder in Tesla, and I think it's going to be 2023, sadly. But also, when you see how beautiful the classics are, you kind of lust after the Roadster a lot less, actually. There's something about sitting into a 1963 car that still smells of leather, that that evokes that history, but then when you put your foot down, it all changes.
But have you got anything that'll 0 to 100 in under 2 seconds yet?
No, and we don't intend to. About 2.2. And back to economics, right? So the minute you go from 2.2 to 1.8, you add about another 100 million to the engineering cost. and I'm not convinced that us humans can tell the difference, to be honest.
Well, both feel like airplanes.
Indeed. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Actually, I heard you do drive a Tesla, though. You don't have a Tesla in your garage? Come on, what do you have?
No. Well, it's not in the garage. It's outside. It doesn't need to be in the garage. So we have a Model S and we have a Model 3 4-wheel drive. Yeah, and we love those. Completely love those, actually. So they're the day-to-days. The problem with bringing like the Stingray out or the Ferrari is it attracts too much attention. If you go anywhere, when you come back, there's a crowd around it, and sometimes you just want to go to the shops and buy a sandwich. So
that's your
Tesla's,
that's your Tesla 3 now. The Tesla 3 is a boring car now. You can drive that and be incognito.
You can be incognito. It's very quick though. But we're huge fans of Tesla, and we're very inspired by Elon, and we use a lot of their products. We use their batteries in our industrial business and stuff. And we're, this is why we need wisdom, right? Like Elon did a podcast with Joe Rogan a while ago, and not the most recent one, but a previous one to that. And clearly, Joe's podcast is inferior to yours.
Nice.
But Elon smoked weed, or whatever the term is, and I think it's legal to smoke weed in California, where it was recorded. And this is a guy that's literally saving the world, right? And I don't care if you disagree with me, fine, but I'm sorry. The reality is he's saving the world. And our human response the day after in the media was, Elon Musk smokes weed. What a disgrace, right? Elon Musk, in that podcast, said some of the most profound stuff I've ever heard come out of anybody's mouth, right? And the mainstream media take was smoking a joint. Like, we're in a very worrying place when this happens, right? It's quite sad, So yeah, we need to become more wise, and we need to become more wise fast. Yeah.
Well, my take on conventional media. A couple more things I wanted to ask you about. You talked and you hinted at, I think you're working on a meatless startup. Where's that at, and what are you doing with that?
Yeah, so what we did there was because we work with some very big food companies, we did a huge amount of research on it. We discovered some stuff, we patented some stuff. And then we had a choice at that point to build our own food factories or just work with other major food manufacturers. And we decided to work with other major food manufacturers. So we're going to make an announcement later in the year, a couple of meat companies of all things that we're announcing products with, basically. So there, we're not going to build our own. We're actually going to partner and use the intellectual property we've developed to push along that agenda. But I want to continue to invest in that space, particularly things like precision fermentation. We'll be making some heavy investments over the next couple of years in that space. Yeah, we love it. It's the next hot sector. Yeah.
So you mentioned this before, and I want you to flesh it out just a little bit. You started this thing called the Cool Planet Experience. What were you
Yeah.
trying to do there, and what do you do there?
So that's part of our wisdom group. And so that is I was saying earlier about, the message that goes out needs to be a lot more forward facing and exciting. So in order to do that, we're very lucky that our offices are in a major old stately home here in Ireland, our headquarters. In fact, according to National Geographic, it's got the third best gardens in the world. And so that has a lot of visitors every year, about 500,000 visitors. And so we set up a center there called Cool Planet Experience to showcase the future, basically, and very optimistically showcase the future. And that's the one I was saying has had like 50,000 visitors in the first 6 months and stuff like that. And so we're very pleased with that. Once COVID passes, we will be opening other centers around the world. We've done deals in Paris for the Olympics, and we've done deals in Sydney and in the US. And so there will be more Cool Planet experiences. So it's kind of like Disney World for climate. Yeah.
So what do I see when I go in? I know you have education programs for students, for business leaders, that kind of thing. So you do educational programming, but what's inspiring in there, and what does the future look like? What do I see when I go in?
Yeah, so the first bit is we take your temperature like any doctor would. So we assess your carbon footprint in a very kind of funny, interactive way. And then we give you a wristband, which has an RFID. And so each part around the journey, then you can tag on. And for each part, it knows what your carbon footprint is and how your carbon footprint is derived. And then the first bit is like a 4D experience explaining climate, what's happening in the world, all of that, but it's 4D, so it really gets you in your gut. And then we do what's called Race to 2050, which is a crazy experience. It's like a huge city in a room, and then it's 2050. We've screwed up the whole thing. It's a bit like Terminator. The whole city is in bits, and then you get to play a series of games on screens to save the city. And as you're saving the city in front of you actually completely changes. Yeah. And it's done with projection mapping and kind of high-tech stuff. Yeah. And then we've got a food thing, which is this crazy game show. So called the F Word. And you go into a room and it's like you're walking into a 1950s cheesy game show. And then you get to answer questions and vote. And then the final bit is the most head-turning bit, is a kind of crazy holodeck where you get to watch holograms of the future. So that's everything, meatless meats, carbon-free transport, everything. And so you get to see the future, basically. And then at the end, you commit. So you commit to what are you going to change about your life now, and so it's been incredibly, incredibly popular. Obviously, COVID has put a little dent in it, but it's been incredibly popular. Yep.
So this is your gaming past coming to light, it sounds like.
A little bit. More my tech past coming to life really than gaming. But yeah, gaming too. Yeah. We know guys who can make a good game.
Have you thought about creating a virtual version of this?
Yeah, so what happened during COVID was we couldn't open more of the centers like we wanted to open. And so actually we created a virtual version that then became an education curriculum. So we approached governments here in Ireland, in Australia, in the UK, and we said, hey, why don't we do a proper curriculum here that's more optimistic, more forward facing? And thankfully they all said, brilliant. So we are creating at the moment a virtual version. And it's kind of interesting because it's kind of TikTok meets climate change. So it's nothing like even other interactive stuff you would have used in the past. It's incredibly short and snappy and highly entertaining. Yeah. By the way, I didn't create that. People much smarter than me did that. Yeah.
So listen, I heard or I read you have a reputation as a sweary-assed Irishman, and that you take inspiration from Michael Collins. Tell me about that.
So Michael Collins is, I'm not exactly sure of the relationship. He's either my second cousin once removed, or something like that. And he's a typical Irish rebel. Well, he's an atypical Irish rebel, actually. During the time of independence from the British Empire, a lot of the rebels were very, they were very, what would you call it, optimistic but not practical. And they wrote a lot of poetry, and they all died young, and they never achieved anything. And then, curiously, Collins was trained by the British civil service as a kid, and so he was very tactical. He created an intelligence network that dismantled the British Empire's intelligence network. And so a raggle-taggle of Irish guys, really not that many, 12 at the core, dismantled the British Empire, basically, and brought it to its knees and forced it into surrender in 21. And so, because he's a relation, and also my brother runs the National Michael Collins Centre, which is a kind of interactive experience around Collins. And so it's quite, Collins would be an inspiration because of that mix of altruism, but also the practical and the numbers, And so in my office, you can see a statue of Collins. And there's a few hints to him in this office I'm in here. There's a T-shirt that Liam Neeson signed because he played Collins in the movie. So it's that history goes very deep. Yeah.
So I heard I read your grandfather was arrested and jailed with him for a time.
That's right. That's right. In fact, my grandfather was trained by Collins in jail. They used to call it the Rebel University. Yeah. Yeah.
So listen, we should wrap up fairly soon. Where do you think this is all going? Where's your business going? Are you focusing more on the energy? What are you going to ramp up over the next few years?
We're going to continue to ramp up energy efficiency. We took on investment last year from an amazing French fund called TCOW. And they're visionary. They share our vision. And they're a 27 billion euro French fund, and they want to save the world like we do. And so that's secured the expansion of the energy business. And then with cars is a mixture of inspiration, art, and money. But we want to launch, we're launching 4 different hyperclassic cars. So that's very exciting. And then more importantly on all of that, in wisdom, the wisdom is our newest division. And we just want to work on getting that out there, because you can solve all these problems, but if people aren't wise, then we might as well not bother, And so we gotta make people wiser, So it's just more of the same. I turned 50 this year, and somebody said to me, "Are you going to retire now?" And I was like, "I haven't even gotten started."
Yeah, what does that even look like? And how much fun could retirement be, for God's sakes?
Yeah, not as much fun as we have. But I guess it depends on your definition of fun, right?
Well, it's funny because my story that's live this week, and part 2 is going live today, I guess, was with that same fellow who did the charger network, and he's now on to a new crazy idea, and he calls it carbon plunk parks. So his new thing is to build parks and to connect them to things. So for example, his network of electric vehicle chargers. So let's say you're charging in Saskatchewan, which is a coal, there's still lots of coal-fired electricity they're phasing out, but it's still, a fair amount of coal in their electricity mix. They calculate the amount of carbon in the electricity that goes into your electric car through the charger, and that gets fed back to a carbon plunk park. And they A, plant trees, and B, they're doing something different as well. They're sequestering carbon. So they're carbonizing things using, I don't know what, pyrolysis or something. And they're calling them carbon plunk parks. So what he's saying is we have the ability now to make it carbon negative, not just carbon neutral.
Yeah, I love that. I have a one, without tying you up any more time. So my idea, which somebody out there, please take this idea, is there's a technology that can capture carbon out of the air and compress it into carbon, right, into effectively coal, right? And what I want to build is, and I have the plans for this, but I just don't have the time. I want to build a machine that looks beautiful, that can be put into parks or into the lobbies of hotels. And what it does is it harvests carbon out of the air. It compresses it into a cube, a tiny cube, a highly polished, beautiful cube. And then when you're checking out of your hotel, they would hand you this beautiful cube and they will say, that is the carbon footprint of your stay in this hotel. Right?
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That's a very similar idea, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But we will never get to do this because there's just too much time.
It sounds to be a little like the Cat in the Hat, with his machine that cleans the house, except this one's cleaning the carbon.
Yeah, that's right. There's a funny one about Elon Musk I was listening to recently on That Inferior podcast. And he said, somebody was saying, you bought all these houses, you're going to collide them together and live in it. Is that the plan? And he said, yeah, I was going to do that. And then I discovered that in the amount of time that I would have spent doing that, I would have gotten us to Mars faster. So I didn't bother with the houses and I just sold them.
Do something.
So I guess...
So he wants to do easy things like go to Mars and space,
exactly.
and make roadsters and whatever.
Yeah. Well, look, he is, he's 6 months younger than me, but he's a hell of an inspiration, I can tell you. I don't know where he came from, but he's a hell of an inspiration.
Yeah, I always like to say he's like Steve Jobs without the anal part.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is I was a huge fan of Steve Jobs as well, but in the books I've read about him, he was just a bit of a
Well, I really laugh when I watch Elon do a presentation because, he's the frumpiest presenter ever.
Completely.
Steve Jobs, if you read his biographies, you find out like he fussed over the angle of the curtains, who was standing where, what position they were in, what music was playing when. He was super anal. And whereas Elon gets on the stage,
Musk is hilarious.
And he just kind of does a mind dump and a stream of consciousness.
Yeah. Did you see Neuralink? Did you see the Neuralink launch?
No.
He was a mess. He was just a complete mess. They were pigs. They were it was just a mess, right? And he didn't have any script and he was just waffling. And only for the fact that he is who he is, you would have just said, who is this idiot? But of course the content of the presentation was mind blowing, right? So
people love him. People love him and they love his ideas. Absolutely. Norman Crowley, it's been truly an inspiration meeting you. I really appreciate the opportunity and I've really enjoyed the time we got to spend together.
Thank you, David. I'm humbled to be on your show, man. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Cool. Hey, mind yourself. I hope you get hiking in the Rockies soon.
My wife, in this COVID year, I spent a lot of time at my cabin, but then my wife got kind of stir crazy. So we started car camping. We're getting on, we used to only backpack.
Yeah, so am I.
And so we did a little car camping in Jasper and day hiking, and we just loved it. So we've already pledged to do more of it next year.
Great. Bring it on. All right. Look, I'm going to fly, mate. Yeah.
Yep.
You have a good one. Take it easy.
Thanks again.
Cheers. Bye.